Well, I want to do a section called, I call it Good Grief. And you might be wondering, what on earth would grief have to do with dating? I thought it would be a good topic to talk about a little bit because I believe that a lot of the issues that come up in dating and a lot of things that we've talked about as far as acting out from hurt and the things that we do that aren't good for us relate often to places that we haven't grieved. Now, it's kind of funny because we think about grief as being bad, I think. You know, I think that it doesn't feel good. You know, feeling sad doesn't feel good. And so we have a tendency to think, I don't want that, or push away from anything that doesn't feel good. So it's kind of an odd idea to think of grief as being good. Good grief, Charlie Brown. So I don't know. I'm not usually good at making little titles, but, you know, good grief. That grief is good. So I really actually want to talk about why that is and why it actually is a good thing to grieve. Let's go to Ecclesiastes 7. And there's a good verse of Scripture that relates to this that I like. It's kind of funny because it says, in Ecclesiastes 7 and verse 3, it says, sorrow is better than laughter. What? That sounds crazy, doesn't it? Because a sad face is good for the heart. Isn't that wild? Does that surprise you at all? I mean, like, why would that be that sorrow could be better than laughter? And so in this category of life, when there's sad things, it does not work, and it is actually hurtful to try and act like it doesn't matter, you know, to try and dismiss things. A lot of times when we have big things that have hurt us in our lives, we minimize, we dismiss, we just shove stuff down and ignore them because we don't want to feel sad. We just want to get over it. Well, I'll tell you, if you just do that in your life where you just try and get over it, because I've spent my life doing that. I shoved down so many things that had happened to me, and I seriously just thought, okay, well, they're not going to affect me. You know, I'm fine. I'll just truck on. I'm tough. I can, you know, endure. But, you know, the Bible talks about you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. So anytime we act against what's true, it's not going to work. Anytime, if something's sad and we're acting like it's not sad, it's not going to work. You know, if we're feeling, or, you know, if we're feeling sad about something and we're just, you know, ignoring it, you know, and pretending it's not there, not going to work. So we want to be in a place that with everything that we do, that we embrace truth, that reality is our friend. And so we want to get to the place of experiencing reality. Now, what's really interesting is you think about not all pains are equal. Some pain is good to experience, and some pain is not good to experience. You think, there's a story where they talk about how a mugger, you know, sticks a knife in a guy, cuts him open, and takes all his money. And so does a surgeon. Sticks his knife in a guy, cuts him open, takes all his money. And but the mugger is something that's harmful. It feels the same, though, doesn't it? I mean, the pain is equal, you know, the result, but one is for healing and, you know, one is for harm. So it's not just that whether it feels bad, it's not good for you. Because depression, actually, if you've ever experienced depression or know people that have experienced depression, is actually a result of not grieving. Depression means that there are sad things inside of you that are frozen up inside of there that aren't let go, that haven't been let out. And so depression will go on forever. Grieving, if it's done appropriately, lasts for a limited period of time. So it's something that you want to do. And so that you want to enter into a grieving that's a healthy thing. And that's why it's funny that the Bible talks about this, is truly like when you need to be sad, you need to be sad about something. The reality is that we deal with loss in our lives. You know, loss is not going to go away in this world. You know, the Bible talks about the world to come, that there will be no more sorrow or no more tears. But right now, we've got losses. And there are many kinds of losses in this world. You know, besides, of course, the one that we think about most when we grieve is the loss as far as someone dying, which is huge, and which is a huge loss. But we have losses all the time, losses of people that we wanted to love us that haven't, losses of jobs, losses of dreams. You know, there are a million things that come up, whether they're small or large. And a lot of times, like in our lives, that I've done it, and I know people, other people, that you feel like you shouldn't be sad, like that's stupid, like you feel dumb. Have you ever felt dumb about being sad about something? Like, it's so small, it shouldn't bother me, you know? And so it's just like, wow, you know? And so you ignore it, and that winds up, again, it gets shoved down in there, and you know, and it doesn't work. So grieving, actually, appropriate grieving unfreezes the loss and lets it out in a way, and that's what actually will cure depression. Like you know, if you grieve properly, that has a lot to do with letting go of depression, which would just go on forever if you don't grieve. So part of the real thing about grieving is experiencing the reality of the loss. So part of that is acknowledging that you actually lost something, not acting like, oh, well, you know how sometimes you hear people that go, something sad, and they don't want you to feel bad, so they go, but it's all for the good, you know, everything happens for a reason or something. And it comes out from, I actually was at a funeral last year, and it was a place where I was crying because I had lost a dear friend of mine. But it was a church system where they didn't grieve, you know, really. So they were all like, well, Christ is coming back, you know, we'll see him again, you know. And it's just sort of like that there wasn't room for people to just be sad about the reality that we lost somebody that we dearly loved and they cared about. So it's embracing the reality that you actually lost something. It is lost. And part of grieving is you must acknowledge that it mattered, that you actually cared. If you're pretending that you didn't care about the loss, you're not going to enter into grieving. So you have to say, yeah, this mattered to me, I wanted it, and I lost it, is a huge key in the grieving process. It's you know, now sometimes what we do, there's a lot of ways that we want to avoid this, though, that we want to avoid grieving. One of them is by protesting, by saying, I don't want it to be true. It should be something else. That's where we talked about before in this class of false hope, you know, where you sit there and you want it to be a different way, so you stay sort of frozen in not wanting to acknowledge what it really is, but what you wished it was, you know, where you stay in a form of protest, where you're just saying, I want it to be this way, you know. I feel kind of embarrassed, but I recently, coming up on being 50, I guess, it's just sort of one of those things that it's becoming more of a reality to me of my mortality, which is a strange thing, you know, like if you're 20s, 30s, you know, it's just, I'm going to live forever. You just don't think about it. And so I've been more aware of that, and that was something that just recently, like, I had to grieve that, you know, like I had to just, you know, I spent some time actually in prayer and crying and just going, God, I don't like this. I don't like that we have to die, you know, kind of thing. But allowed me to just sort of get connected to the fact that, you know, like I found myself protesting it, like wanting it to be different, and I was just like, kind of funny, because this isn't going to work. Like, I can protest all I want, it's not going to change the fact that I'm mortal, you know, that people die. So at some point you have to move past the point of protesting, of not wanting it to be a certain way, and where you embrace the reality of that you've actually lost something. Sometimes, like in protesting something, it's like if you've lost, this comes up, and we might have mentioned this before in a different place in the class, but sometimes if you have experienced not feeling loved by a parent, where you act out from that is, and I did this a lot, is chasing somebody that you can't get love from, hoping like that's still a part that like by chasing somebody that doesn't know how to give love, you're hoping if you can finally get love from somebody. That's what I did in my ex-husband when I married him, was I married somebody that was a lot like my father that I wasn't getting love from, and thought, okay, well, if I can finally get love from him. I mean, I didn't think this consciously, but inside it was part of this thing that we wind up getting into relationships trying to cure old hurts that way, because we haven't really experienced the loss. We haven't allowed ourselves to say, wow, to get in the reality that was really sad. You know, a lot of the things that happened to me in my childhood were really sad, and I never grieved them. I was just the tough person that And I was proud of that. I was proud that I didn't care. I was proud that I was, you know, that I could take it, you know. I thought people were wussy that couldn't, kind of thing, like, look what I could take, you know. And I thought that this was doing well for me because I didn't feel, you know, I was kind of calloused and kind of hard-hearted. But I was acting out. There were all these other places that was showing up in my life. And this is why I just wanted to touch on grieving a little bit, so that if you can see places in your life and in your history that you haven't grieved about things, places that you've been hurt, especially if you've got some family things and places that you've been hurt or things that you didn't receive from your parents, and places like that, you need to grieve. Part of grieving is, like I say, realizing that you did care, it didn't matter, that it did actually hurt you, you know, and that you're not the tough soldier. And allowing yourself to go ahead and be sad, and acknowledging that it was significant, that it was a loss, and then also including other people in the grieving process. You know, like in the Bible is an Eastern book, and they used to grieve. They used to grieve. Like they would tear their clothes. They would put ashes. They would wail and wail. You know, the Wailing Wall in Israel. They would just wail and wail and wail in their grieving. And it was like, it's healthy. And then they had others that would come and cry with them. The Bible, let's take a look actually at Rome. Well, let's look at, yeah, Romans 12. There's a verse of scripture. Romans 12, and in verse 15 it says, rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. Like, one of the ways that we really want to be there for each other is not just to be there during the happy times to celebrate the victory, you know, but we want to be there where we can mourn with people, where we don't try and put a Band-Aid over it and try and tell somebody Christ is coming back, but we mourn with them when somebody's mourning, that we help them to get that it's not crazy for them to be sad, you know, and that they're not alone, and that they're understood. And it really helps incredibly. I've been, you know, at our church in particular, we spend a lot of time, you know, in our small groups where people get to talk about things and places that they've hurt. And it's not staying a victim. A victim is where you never, you know, where you just sit there saying, poor me, and you never, basically you're never actually accepting the loss. You're still in protest mode. A victim is really somebody that's still protesting that you didn't want it to be that way, and you're hoping it'll be different, or, you know what I'm saying? Grieving is where you just really let the reality and allow yourself to be sad, and then what it does is it reboots you to reality because you let it go. You get sad about it, you acknowledge that you care, and in that process you let it go to the point that you can let new things in. Once you actually let it go, and it's not, because you're not letting it go when you shove it down in there. You're not letting it go. It's still there. You know, but when you actually do grieve it, which you can only do by getting that there is a real loss and it mattered to you, and you let other people be there for you in it. You know, let their love and grace in. You leave space when you let something go. You're leaving space to get filled up by other things, you know, by letting new things in. So, yeah, so basically, the idea is saying goodbye to what could never be, and then this is really where true healing begins. That we're letting go of what we could never have. Like I've, you know, that you're just getting it, that you're never going to have it. You know, that it's gone. And eventually the sadness honestly goes away. It's okay that it might take time for grieving too. There's no like little formula on how long, you know, like, okay, you have X amount of time to be sad. Sometimes there are bigger things that take longer to sort of to see and to allow yourself to see what the loss is, and to just give yourself time and to allow, you know, and to allow people to be there for you in it. And then, like I say, it opens you up to receive new things, new desires, new attachments, new hope, new energy. You know, it's and then what you bring out of that is the loss still can't like own you, but at least you get the experience out of it. You know, I had a really horrific past, but guess what? I don't have to live in that past. It's not owning me anymore, especially now that I've been able to grieve it. There are places that it was coming up and calling the shots in my life before I was able to grieve that were invisible and I didn't even see, that I was acting out from. But but I come out from the wisdom and the experience. And so at least that's one thing that even in the most tragic situations, you know, that we can bring out, from some of those sad things. So why is it, that if grieving is so good, like why would we avoid it? A big reason that people don't grieve is they lack resources, because grieving is letting go. We can't, it's like you can't let go of something. Like in a famine, you hold on, like if in a famine you'd hold on to moldy food, like you'd eat garbage in a famine. Do you know what I'm saying? If you're hungry, you'll eat garbage. So if there's a vacuum, again, we've talked a lot about in this class about relationships and the value of relationships. And so that's a big reason why you're not able to really look at sad things unless you've got some support where you're not going to be empty, where there's not just this big hole, empty hole inside, where you've got other people to fill in with the love and the grace. So, so you have to have support. And so that's why it talks about in lots of places in the Bible that we're supposed to mourn with other people, that mourn, that the ideas that we are heard and that people empathize with us and that we're understood and that we're supported. And so in that, we are able to, take a look and be able to allow ourselves to experience the sadness, which is actually really good for us, and it's temporary. Just like the surgery is cutting open, just like the surgeon cuts somebody open, that pain is temporary. It's like you heal, you get better, and you're better off, afterwards. So grieving and allowing yourself to go through that process does not feel good. It's not going to feel comfortable. And if you haven't grieved before, it is going to be something that go, oh, this feels terrible. And it'll feel maybe like there's no end in sight. But really, when you have the friends and you have the support being there around you, it will end. There will be a time that you can actually let go, and then that opens you up for new and better things. So this is a big thing in relationships, because we want to take a look at places and be willing to take a look at places that we've been hurt before, especially in relationships, whether they are friends, whether they're family, whatever relationships that, that we felt loss from in particular. It's really important to allow ourselves to grieve and to let go so that we can move on in a better way, where we are opening ourselves up to good things and not just shoving everything back. So gather some friends around you and be willing, to have some friends that love you, that can be there for you, to take a look at some of the places that you might have to grieve. It feels good in the long run.
I guess I always felt like I had this hole in my heart ever since I was little. Ever since my mom and dad split, I always remember having this hole in my heart, like it was empty, and I knew, and the only way I knew how to fill it was, I guess, to be in a relationship with men, with boys, and because I was 13, so I was like, everyone else is doing it, why not, and I remember just having this hole in my heart, and that's the only thing that I could think of could fill it, and even though it hurt so much, to be in a relationship. And when this hole, and when but anything that would leave this hole, it was heartache. I was like, oh God, I need to feel it again.
When she moved over there and I was broken up, I wanted to find the love somewhere else. So what did I do? I started going to clubs. I started drinking. I started doing drugs. I started, just the attention of girls coming to me and talking to me. That felt good.
I thought I was making these guys happy, and I thought that I was in turn making me happy being with these people, but looking back, it's like I lost that part of me. I lost my childhood. I lost a lot of time and gained a lot of heartache instead. And being 13, having to worry if I'm pregnant or not, or if I'm having STD, or if I had an STD, I couldn't talk to my mom or my grandma. There was nobody really. I felt so ashamed that I couldn't talk to anybody, and just worrying about those things at such a young age, it felt like it put a lot of stress on me, and I felt like I did grow older when I didn't need to do that.
Didn't realize in all these years that I was putting myself out there to make it you know, whether I was the other woman, whether I was a one-night stand, whether I was, you know, just doing it just to do it, or, you know, I wasn't really thinking or doing what I should have done. But now that my life is in a way, you know, I'm in a better place right now, and I could see myself different, and I look back on it, and it hurts to know that I did all that to make myself feel loved. But now that I look at myself now and I see that that's not the kind of love that I wanted in my life, and that's not the kind of, you know, relationship that I wanted.
I'm single now, and I think that I've made a lot of realizations, but during that period of time, I was just really fed up. I was very confused when it came to the opposite sex, and I really did not know what to look for at all. And as I look back now, I see that a lot of the ways that I acted and the actions that I took in trying to pursue some sort of relationship was acting out of like a lot of the hurt that I had experienced, where I was trying to fill this hole with love and affection, and really I was looking to fill it with love and affection from someone who was unavailable. I think that I felt that if I could do that, then I might achieve something that I had been missing earlier in my life, where I wasn't feeling a whole lot of love. I wasn't feeling affection from certain people, and I wasn't feeling valued.
God was really there for me in the right place at the right time. Like, even though I made a wrong choice, he wasn't like, okay, well, I'm not going to support you anymore, like, I'm not going to fight for you anymore. He was more like, okay, now that you made this choice and now that you're hurt, like, let me guide you to a place where you can get more healing.